last daughter of a forlorn line, shall guide him into history. Beneath the crypts, prophecies clash. The war of ancient enemies.
Might and Magic of Dark Messiah, a linear action-orientated offshoot from the veteran Might and Magic series, was released in 2006 on PC, and later rebranded as Might and Magic of Dark Messiah Elements on the Xbox 360 in 2008. The title was developed by Arcane Studios, who are now better known for Dishonored 2012, and similarities between the two titles are plentiful. Dark Messiah is an intensely kinematic game. Built in Half-Life 2's Source engine, the title's focus on physicality and empowerment by sensation is carried by the judicious use of object physics and environmental interaction, where tactility rules the player's battery of aggression, and lends credence to the game's cult status. Melee encounters are grossly engaging, and are truly vicious on higher difficulties, particularly if one does not allocate stat points with the maximum efficiency. Stat points themselves can be distributed into 3 archetypal skill trees: magical combat, physical combat, and stealth or utility abilities, and are exclusively divvied out following objective completion, placing your character's overall growth squarely in line with the game's linear narrative. Indeed, whilst the game's open leveling structure appears to encourage the adoption of skills and abilities from a mix of the 3 different disciplines, our tendency towards the path of least resistance as players tends to narrow down the opportunities that this sort of system can realistically afford. That is to say, if we are offered an especially satisfying and effective means of dispensing with obstacles and enemies in a game, we are almost always going to elect to use that over any other means available to us. Say for instance, choosing the most powerful weapon or ability at our disposal over any weaker alternatives. Ultimately, this means that in a game like Dark Messiah, as we become increasingly proficient and specialised, and as we invest more skill points into a particular discipline, we are less likely to utilise other skills at our disposal, particularly as they become less effective in the face of larger obstacles and more powerful enemies. This produces an uncomfortable dichotomy between a player's statistical empowerment within the game's narrative and their mechanical empowerment within the game's, gameplay, where our choices wane and compelling emergent gameplay opportunities are dulled, snuffed out by a morass of repetition and banality. This effect is particularly pronounced in the final stages of Dark Messiah, as you primarily fight ghouls, who are comparative damage sponges deprived of the fun swashbuckling of standard orcs and knights. In fact, most enemy types other than orcs and knights are in one way or another frustrating encounters. Spiders and floating jellyfish are exercises in side-strafing and left mouse button clicking, and goblins outright betray the pleasure inherent in the game's sword-fighting mechanics by possessing a melee range much in excess of appearances. And as appearances go, Dark Messiah, whilst rough around the edges, is, well, a Source game through and through. By modern standards, it's not fantastically pretty on either a technical or artistic level, and voice work is at best lackluster, but there is sufficient justice done to the game's rather bland fantasy moorings, and few bugs are present in its current patched-up iteration. The music is also appropriately grandiose, and goes some way to enhancing the rest of the game's presentation.
Don't worry, you'll learn to enjoy the pain. You can call me Xana.
Dark Messiah's ropey plot is drenched in, if not defined by, egregious misogyny, with a Faustian duet of femme fatales compassing the game's astoundingly unironic morality system with about as much subtlety as modesty.
My dear, thank you.
The bafflingly straight-played tropaic paradigm of fell succubian seductress versus chaste maiden recently dispossessed of her father is cringeworthy, if not downright repugnant. Honestly though, I doubt even the most inveterate sexist would relish schlock this condescending. Might and Magic of Dark Messiah is, all in all, a fun, if moronic romp through the familiar trappings of fantastical cliché, if only for the harrowing and abandoned combat present on the hardcore difficulty, where I enjoyed myself the most, though almost inevitably there are many sequences, such as the Paukai Ballista boss, where the difficulty spikes exponentially, making the experience a bit rougher hewn than I would have liked. Looking forward, there are a number of ways to remedy the aforementioned problem of specialization and progression, and the refinements present in Arcane's latest release, Dishonored, which is truthfully a far more focused experience, goes some way towards that, even if melee combat in that game is somewhat lacking by comparison. For its many faults, there's something uniquely satisfying about Dark Messiah that makes me yearn for a modern game with a more mature, more polished take on the same combat system. 7 out of 10.